Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories as per usual. I hope you all enjoy them. I oftentimes get comments asking me what the best ways to help out the channel are, and honestly, just dropping a like, subscribing if you haven't already, and maybe if you want to go above and beyond, telling a friend about the channel is always very, very appreciated. But yeah, I'm not going to waste any more of your time. We just have 2 hours of horror stories with no mid-roll ads. I hope you all enjoy them. I always do my best to make sure that I'm not uploading slop, and of course, this video is no different. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax. Enjoy the 2 hours of horror stories with no mid-roll ads right after the ad break after this intro. There will not be any more ad breaks after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. I don't believe in family curses. I always thought that was something out of bad movies, something superstitious. People made up to blame for their own failures. My family was always normal. My dad, Joseph, Joe to his friends, was a retired engineer, a widower for 15 years. A methodical man who labeled every box in the house. My mom died of cancer when I was a teenager, and after that, it was just us two in a quiet, respectful routine. I met Sophie 8 months ago at a coffee shop near my work. She ordered a double espresso, and I spilled my cappuccino all over her table trying to grab a napkin. A complete disaster. She laughed, a clean, warm laugh, and said she'd forgive me if I bought her another coffee. The rest is a cliche. Dates, movies, weekends together, meeting the friends, meeting the family. My dad loved her. Polite girl, beautiful, looks you in the eye. He said after I brought her over for dinner, "Don't let her get away, son." I didn't plan on it. My dad died 3 weeks ago. A stroke. It was fast, painless, but the emptiness he left behind is enormous. Sophie has been my rock through all of it. She moved in to help me sort through things, clean the house, decide what to donate, sell or keep. She cooks. She keeps me company. She holds my hand when I wake up in the middle of the night with that feeling that I've forgotten something important. I had no idea how literal that feeling would become. My dad's house is one of those old places with big rooms and a basement he turned into a storage space over the years. We spent the first week on the main floor, kitchen, living room, bedrooms. Then we moved up to the attic, and yesterday, we finally went down to the basement. Sophie stayed in the kitchen making lunch when I went down the wooden stairs that creaked in protest. The smell was mildew and old paper, that smell of frozen time. Bare bulbs hanging from the low ceiling lit up shelves crammed with cardboard boxes, all labeled in my dad's neat handwriting. I started with the shelves on the left, documents 1990 through 2000, photos, miscellaneous, family heirlooms. I grabbed the photo box, sat on a old wooden bench, and started flipping through. Just regular photos. Me as a kid, my dad younger, my mom still alive. I cried a little, I'll admit. Then I put it all away and moved on to the next box. Old albums. Inside I found 3 hardcover albums with those black pages and sticky corner mounts. The first one was from the 80s. My dad with long hair, floral shirts, hugging friends at parties, graduation photos. A few of my grandmother, who died when I was 2. It was the second album where everything changed. A 4x6 photo, color but slightly yellowed with age. My dad in his early 20s, arm around a girl at the beach. She was wearing a red bikini, laughing at the camera, her head resting on his shoulder. Black, straight hair, almond-shaped eyes, tan skin, a perfect, wide smile. My heart stopped. It was Sophie, the same Sophie who was, at that very moment, in my kitchen making pasta. I took a deep breath. Lookalikes exist. Doubles are more common than you think. Probably an aunt, a grandmother, someone in her family who looked just like her. even the faint scar on her left eyebrow. My mom always said I was too skeptical for my own good. I turned the page. There she was again, now in an older photo, black and white, edges slightly worn. She was sitting on a park bench next to a man in a suit and a hat, a man I recognized as my grandfather, Anthony, from the photos my dad had in the living room. My grandfather was smiling shyly at the camera. She was smiling too. The same Sophie, the same expression, the same high-colored dress my grandmother wore in a wedding photo I knew by heart. My hands started shaking. I flipped through pages frantically looking for newer photos, older photos, anything that could explain this. I found a third, a fourth. She was in a family portrait from the 40s, standing behind my great-grandparents, her hands on my great-grandmother's shoulders. She was in a graduation photo of my great-uncle from the 60s, wearing a floral dress. She was in a Polaroid from the 70s, hugging a distant cousin I never met. Always her, always the same. I slammed the album shut and just sat there, listening to my own heart hammering in my chest. Upstairs, Sophie's voice hummed a tune I didn't recognize. I needed more information. I needed to understand. I put the album back at the bottom of the box, went up the stairs and walked right past the kitchen, mumbling something about needing air. I locked myself in my dad's office, a small room at the back of the house he used as a retreat. Inside, his computer was still on, an old desktop full of folders and files. I started digging. My dad was organized even in his digital life. There was a folder labeled Family. Inside, subfolders. Parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, cousins, historical documents. I opened the first one. Digitized photos from even older albums, probably stored somewhere I hadn't found yet. My great-grandfather, James, in 1920, serious and bearded, in front of a simple house, and next to him, wearing a light dress and a straw hat. Sophie, the same, untouched by time. I opened another folder, great-great-grandparents, a sepia photo with serrated edges. My great-great-grandfather, William, in military uniform, probably from World War I, and next to him, in a long dress with a serene look. Sophie, young, beautiful, eternal. The last folder was genealogy. My dad had digitized old documents, birth, marriage, death certificates, hand-drawn family trees. I kept clicking until I found a folder called Parish Records 1800 to 1850. Photos of handwritten documents in old script. Difficult to read. One was the baptismal record of my great-great-great-grandfather Isaac from 1837. Next to it, a pencil notation. Married to Mary, record not found. And then I saw the next image, a photograph, the oldest I had ever seen, a daguerreotype, more like a metal plate than a photo. Two faces emerged from the dark background, almost ghostly. A man with a thick beard, deep-set eyes. A young woman in a high-collared dress, her hair in a tight bun. The woman was Sophie. The man was my great-great-great-grandfather. The folder had more photos. She appeared in several, in a portrait alone with an enigmatic smile, in a group photo, next to children who must have been my ancestors as kids. Always the same, always unchanging, a constant in the lineage of the men in my family. I sat in the chair, my entire body ice cold. She had been there, in every generation. She had dated my dad, dated my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, my great-great-great-grandfather. What happened to all of them? A horrible idea started forming in my mind. My dad, widowed at 50, healthy, Active. Died of a stroke at 72. Normal? Maybe. My grandfather Anthony died of heart complications at 58, according to my dad. I never looked into it. My great-grandfather James died young too, in a farm accident. Always vague stories, told with sighs and silences. She was the only constant. She was there, and they disappeared. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made me jump. The doorknob turned. "Honey, you in there? Lunch is ready." Her voice, sweet and concerned. The same voice that comforted me every night. The same voice that must have comforted my dad decades ago. I opened the door. She was standing there in an apron, a wooden spoon in her hand. Her hair was tied up carelessly. Her face slightly flushed from the stove heat. Beautiful, perfect, and terrifying. "You okay?" she asked, tilting her head. "You look..." "Fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just missing him, you know? Going through his stuff." She nodded sympathetically, reached out and touched my face. "Come eat. I'll help you in here later if you want." I followed her to the kitchen like a sleepwalker. I sat at the table. I ate the pasta without tasting it. She talked about her day, about a neighbor who said hi, about the prices at the market. I answered in monosyllables, my eyes fixed on her, trying to find a crack, an imperfection, something that would reveal the monster. I found nothing. Just a beautiful woman who loved me, who cooked for me, who slept next to me. Night fell. She went to take a shower. I stayed in the living room, my phone in my hand, thinking about calling someone. The police, a priest, anyone. But what would I say? My girlfriend is the same person appearing in photos from the 19th century? They'd lock me up. When the shower turned off, I made a decision. I needed to confront her. Not aggressively, but carefully. I needed to see her reaction. She came out of the bathroom in a robe, wet hair dripping over her shoulders. Beautiful. Always so beautiful. "Sophie?" I called, my voice steadier than I expected. "Can I show you something?" She smiled, curious. "Sure." I led her to the office, turned on the computer, opened the folder with the photos. She stood behind me, her warm breath on my neck. I showed her the first photo, her with my dad at the beach. "Who's that?" I asked, pointing. She tilted her head, frowned. "Wow, she looks just like me, huh? Must be a relative of yours. Your grandmother, maybe? Cousin?" I showed her the second one, her with my grandfather. Again, the resemblance is incredible. Strong genes, huh? I showed her the third one, her with my great-grandfather. Silence. I showed her the fourth one, her with my great-great-grandfather. The silence stretched like a razor's edge. Then she laughed, a low laugh, different from the clean one I knew. Older, tired. "You were always so curious, weren't you, Joe?" My blood ran cold. "My name is Luke," I corrected, my voice barely a whisper. She placed her hand on my shoulder, a light, almost affectionate touch. "I know, sweetheart, but you're just like him. Exactly like him. The same way of furrowing your brow when you're worried. The same nail-biting habit. The same smell." I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't obey. She leaned in, her lips brushing my ear. "Your father was the best of them, you know. The sweetest. I was so sad when he left, but then you appeared. So similar. So him. It was like he had come back." "What are you?" I managed to ask. She sighed as if the question was tedious. "Doesn't matter. I've been with so many of you, since your great-great-great-grandfather Isaac. He found me in the woods, you know. said I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen, took me home, introduced me to the family. He was so naive. What did you do to him? Nothing, she said, and there was something worse than the simplicity of the answer. I didn't do anything. I just stayed, and one day they're gone. Like your dad. Like your grandfather. Like all of them. And I stay, waiting for the next one. I managed to stand, stumbling backward, away from her touch. She didn't move, just watched me with those deep, ancient, empty eyes. Why me? I asked, my voice breaking. Because you're the next one, she answered with a sad smile. The next Joe, the next Anthony, the next James. Always the same blood, always the same smell, always the same end. I ran. I don't know how, but I ran out of the office, out the front door, into the dark street. I ran until I couldn't anymore, until my lungs burned, until I fell to my knees on the asphalt. I didn't take my phone, money, or ID. I just stayed there, gasping, staring at the empty street, at the distant house lights. She didn't follow me. She doesn't need to. Because now as I write this on a computer in a cyber cafe, using money a stranger gave me when he saw my desperation, I can feel it. I can feel her watching me from somewhere. I can smell her in the wind. I know that no matter where I go, she'll be there. She's been there for 200 years. She'll be there for 200 more. And I'm the next one. The next on the list. The next Joe. The next man in the family she chose. She said she doesn't do anything. That she just stays. But I remember my dad. Healthy, active, dead of a stroke at 72. I remember my grandfather. Dead at 58 of heart complications. I remember my great-grandfather, dead in a farm accident. She doesn't do anything. She just stays, and while she stays, we go. We wither, we fade, we die. And she stays, waiting, always waiting. If anyone reads this, don't try to find me. Don't try to help. Just be careful who you love. Be careful who seems too familiar. Be careful who seems like they've always been there. Because maybe, yes, they have. And maybe, they're never leaving. My girlfriend and I had moved into a lovely 3-bed, detached house, nestled on a quiet rural street just out of town. Honestly, when the estate agent told us the asking price, our jaws hit the floor. We questioned whether it was too good to be true, expecting all manner of hidden issues, but we'd lived there for 2 months with almost no problems. At least, none with the house. Our street bordered 2 fairly expensive agricultural acreages, and with them cutting us off from the main body of our small town, the area had little foot or vehicle traffic. That being said, for some reason, since our move-in date, I hadn't seen another soul. Yes, there were the unmistakable sounds of people in their homes, on the street, or even the sounds of passing vehicles, but at no time did I ever emerge from the property to see them in person. Sophie didn't seem to find that concerning, especially being an introvert at heart. Simply says they might not be occupied. Still, apart from the strange feeling of being watched, which I chalk up to being the new family, something else also caught me off guard. Our dog Ronnie was an energetic and frankly loud lab, which is part of the reason we were looking for a property with a large garden, though for some reason, he wouldn't go outside, opening the side door and even clipping him up for a walk. Ronnie would fight to stay inside. The monumental flip from a high-octane outdoorsy animal to a quiet, reserved inside dog was just bizarre. I'd occasionally persuade him out for a short toilet run in the middle of the day, but as soon as visibility dropped, he was locked to Sophie's side, almost cowering in fear of something unseen. It came to a head when I tried to get him out before bed, and it took all my strength to wrestle the squirming, flailing animal out of the door. In the process, he nipped me, which is something he'd never shown any tendencies of before moving. Sophie said he might have developed a fear of the dark due to the new environment, but I wasn't buying that. Still content to agree, I fitted a motion-activated light to our back door, though that didn't entice him to out. Working from home, as I'm a self-employed carpenter, I'd often find long discarded items as I sought to clean up my new workspace. Rummaging around my workspace, just trying to catch up with a series of slowly piling commissions, I found a small picture frame. Expecting it was simply an item left by a previous occupant, I rotated it in my hand. Though the image had sustained noticeable water damage, I imaged it, showed a family. Obscured at the back were the two parents with their daughter stood front and center, as her long black hair oscillated in the breeze of what looked to be a beautiful day. With a great view of the road from my workshop, I'd occasionally catch the faintest inkling of eyes on me, and find myself reacting to any sight, sound, or movement on our street, rushing out the gate like a crazed person. The street would be as desolate as ever. Sometimes I felt as if the otherwise ambient sounds of people doing their thing was intended to lure me out. The more I focused on that oddity, the more I started to notice every single property would have a light of some sort on in the evenings. Whether it was a lounge, kitchen, or bedroom light, it was evident people were actively switching them on and off. Weirder still, their cars would move, though I'd never catch them departing or returning. Moving vans, people parked on the street, even a motorbike on the drive. I stayed up for 2 consecutive nights, just watching, waiting for someone to emerge, but nothing. Slightly strange, I know, but I started cataloging everything. Each house number had a tally, anything from which room had lights on, when the cars were missing, and at what time they returned. My work stalled as the strangeness of our street took a twisted precedent. The worst things, though, were unmistakable sounds of people talking. Each noise mimicked human speech patterns exactly, though the words spoken were jumbled, matted. In each case, they were just loud enough to be heard, but not fully understood. With an instance, I swear, I could hear out a state agent mixed in amongst. In the day, the street was silent with no motion, so long as I observed. However, an echoing cacophony of family chatter filled those vacant rooms as the night drew closer. Though I'm ashamed to admit it, I peeked. Watching through those otherwise animate windows, there was nothing lifelike. The rooms lay bare, filled with just enough furniture to seem lived in from the outside, but sanitized, stale. Some part of me wanted to try the handle, just to see if there were people in, but I stopped myself. Some primal part of my brain screamed for me to back away, and I'm thankful I did. I couldn't help but bring it up to Sophie again, and she gave me that same tired response. To her, this was nothing more than another ramble about an issue I'd crafted, but I was unsettled. I tried to drop it into conversation with my supplier, cashiers, and even the homeless guy outside of the superstore, but nobody seemed to have a clue, skirting around the question and giving no clear answer. Arriving home from a later than expected delivery to a client out of town, I clambered from my car, oblivious to the dead street around me. The far-off bark of a dog or mumbled chatter from next door didn't do anything to tempt me, as it had the days prior. Glancing up at the glow of a bedroom across the street, a silhouette caught my eye. I'd been so used to the lack of expectation that I didn't even compute what the figure might have been. Though as my tired synapses fired, my attention refocused. Stood in the second-story bedroom was a window. That, or a girl, though I couldn't make out their face fully. She had long, flowing black hair. Slightly excited that I had actually seen a living person in one of those houses, I waved. I don't know if it was simply a subconscious reaction or my brain seeking confirmation that I wasn't hallucinating. To my surprise, she waved back. A slower, more unnatural motion, as if she were copying an action she couldn't fully comprehend. But real movement nonetheless. Reiterating that to Sophie, I expected her to drop the sarcastic, "I told you so," but her nonchalant response confused me. "You joking? That couple moved out last week. Didn't you see the van?" Racking my brain again, I was left with more questions, though an accident drew my focus. Some fairly loud yelling had worked Ronnie up, causing him to relieve himself on the kitchen floor. Panicking as the stream continued, I rushed him to the door, hoping he'd willingly finish up outside as the shouts still echoed back. Dropping like a rock, he fixed himself to the tiled floor, holding firm as I tried fruitlessly to yank him closer. Fortunately, he'd stopped by that time, but just to be sure, he still needed to go out. Knowing he wasn't going to budge without a fight, I opted to step out onto the fluorescent glow of the porch light, hoping that would satiate his fears. Stepping through the open doorway, the short click of the bulb returning to life silenced those scrambled barks into faint murmurs, trailing off as I emerged into the light. Taking a handful of steps to the perimeter illuminated porch, I turned to the now petrified dog. His wide yellow eyes shot past me into the shadowed black of our garden. Not as sensitive as his, my eyes didn't outline that gang of misshapen silhouettes at first. Staring deeper into the inky black, I quickly grasped what they were. Anywhere from 5 to 10 humanoid shapes glared back through blank visages. Each one jerked in a spastic twitch as their forms fluctuated just enough to mimic the natural rhythms of a human body, though far too rigid to be flesh. Feeling each ice-cold sweat bead dribble down my brow, we were locked in place for who knows how long. Each second I stood petrified. The silence stirred. The group muttered, each sound getting louder and louder, though far too scattered to be decipherable. Mustering the courage to take one step backwards, still locked in on their forms, they advanced at an identical pace. Sadly, that prolonged period of petrification had triggered the resulting click. Instantaneously, my body flung back for the door, reaching for the handle as the porch light returned to life once again, slamming that brittle barrier close behind me. I collapsed against it as they called, louder than before, enough to draw Sophie's attention. She questioned what I was doing, but I couldn't mumble out the right string of words to get her to understand. My jumbled sputters were not dissimilar to those still human-adjacent calls outside. Pushing me back away from the barrier I'd held in place, she stepped to the frame. It was almost as if I knew what she was about to do, but as time stood still, I was powerless. In the same way your body alerts you the millisecond before your alarm blares. I knew what she was reaching for. Paralyzed, I could do nothing but watch that frail wooden door implode the moment she twisted the handle, being swallowed up by the advancing mass. Turning through tear-filled eyes, I bolted for the safest place I know, like a coward, not turning back, his yelps chasing up the stairs as those calls reverberated back to me. Slamming the door and heaving my bed up, their croaks quickly reached my makeshift blockade, though I couldn't be sure how strong or cognitive they were. It didn't matter. Mixed in with the jumbled mess of voices, still regurgitating broken sounds, was her soft tones, unmistakable in the amalgam symphony. I knew what she wanted. I questioned opening that door, but no matter how much I may have once cared for the person they'd once signified, I knew they were as hollow as this street. As soon as I relayed my address, the operator on the other end cut the line, leaving me with no hope of salvation. I doubt I'm the first, and I scarcely believe I'll be the last. Right now, I have no way out. I can hear a new wave outside the window, though they're obscured by the descent below. If I make it until the morning, maybe they'll disperse, avoid being fully viewed. But that's a long shot. I doubt they'll let me leave so easily. Maybe if you're here next, moving into a beautiful property that's just too good to be true, you'll hear me. Another puppeteered voice, just audible enough to give the illusion of an unassuming neighborhood. Leave while you have the chance to. There are no people living on Holloway Lane. The alarm blares and I slam the button before it could scream again, like slapping an extremely obnoxious fly. Still blinking away sleep, I check the system to my right as it scrolls through the reports. Minor impact, debris strike. More scrolling, more reports. All systems nominal, bar a slight drain on the main power. All normal. I maneuver my arms, pressing them against the sarcophagus of my sleeping pod before sliding them up in front of my body. It gets easier every time. Reaching up near my head, I pull the release and slowly reveal myself to my small home. I silence the remaining alarms and begin my routine to prepare for a spacewalk. Good morning. How was your sleep? A somewhat feminine voice calls. Sleep was fine, I reply. What's for breakfast? Bagels, cereal, eggs? Nothing better than good old nutrient paste today. Tasty. And what shall you do today? The usual. Repairs and spacewalks. Fantastic. And finally, how are you feeling? I open my mouth but hesitate, the words almost forming out of habit. I hold the pause. That's great to hear, the voice says anyway. I glance toward the speaker mounted on the wall and reach over, pressing stop in the recording. The cabin falls quiet, the sudden absence heavier than the noise ever was. I wish I could mimic my partner's voice perfectly, but my subpar attempt will have to do. I kiss my hand and press my hand to the crude drawing of her next to the speaker. I wish I was also a better artist. I take in my surroundings again, my 2-meter cube, everything an adult needs, reduced to essentials. A nutritional paste dispenser, a waste hole, a suit holder, scraps of paper with scrawled notes and half-finished thoughts, drifting lazily in the air. Great indeed, I whisper. The station hums around me, old, tired, still breathing. So am I. I suit up in the cramped space, kicking the flittering papers aside as I force my leg in, slipping once again into a cavity made for a larger man. The suit holds me fast, rugged and unforgiving, but it will keep me alive out there. I brace myself against the wall and slide down as it seals along my back. A slight modification I made myself, against protocol. It would be a lot easier if someone else were here to help me suit up, but that's not going to happen. Finalizing the process, I grab the helmet from its niche and slide it over my head, clipping it into the chest ring. The readouts flash. O2 levels are lower than my previous walk. The CO2 scrubbers and OGS are probably slowing down. Finally, while securing my tool bag, I slide into another hole, much like a torpedo tube, but instead of firing a missile or ordnance, the ordnance is me. I flick the cycle switch and the airlock spins up, depressurizing the small chamber before the exterior hatch opens and I am free to let the void take me. I crawl out onto the surface of my workstation. At this rotation, I am facing oblivion, the emptiness of space, flickering lights of distant stars and planets peeking into my insignificant life. When I exit my safety net on the side, there is nothing to orient me. No horizons, no planet below to remind me why I am up here. The pause lingers longer than usual. Instead of starting my walk, I stare, drifting. I let go of the metal, just to see if it will take me today. I drift longer and longer towards its inky blackness. Maybe this time I will be swallowed up. Then the tether tightens and snaps me back to consciousness. Not today, I guess. I crawl back along the line, letting my view of the satellite fill my vision as deep gray clouds frame it below. Another storm is forming, a massive one by the look of it. I wish I could hear the rain instead of my own breathing and the vibrations traveling up my arms as my hands grip the line. I touch down on the surface and crest over the hole, making my way towards one of the large dishes that pockmark the craft skin. I keep looping my tether into the small hooks I have bolted over the tiles, shortening its length and securing it as I go, much like a mountaineer climbing ice. The beating rhythm of my movements vibrates through me, my breath radiating through my helmet. As I breathe, I sense something strange, a presence from in my suit. Another sound pushes through, breaking the normality. Another breath. I pause and hold on to the side of the satellite. There is a moment where I breathe and I swear I hear something else accompany my intake. Delayed by a brief moment, for a split second, I tense as I think that a creature sits inside my suit, breathing my air. I stay still, counting my breaths. A few pass, and I only hear my own. All that sleep, and I'm still exhausted. Soon I reach the dish and begin the procedures. I check the dish first. Structurally, it's fine, just a minor hit from debris. I wrench the fragment loose and let it drift off into space. It's long and jagged, clearly part of something bigger, maybe another satellite. It spins once, then disappears into the void, out of sight, out of mind. A shallow dent near the rim catches my eye, a tiny crack spreading from it. Nothing serious, but left alone it could worsen. I press a patch over the crack, smoothing it down until it sticks. Simple, effective. Not perfect, but enough. Next comes alignment. I loosen the bolts just enough to nudge the dish by hand, watching the orientation ticks crawl across my visor. The curve is holding, close enough. That's all it needs to keep sending and receiving. Not that it does much these days. Once that's done, I crawl over to the control box and plug in my PDA. The cable slots in easily. A soft calibration tone pulses through the system while I watch the signal meter. Peaks, dips, mostly nonsense. Nothing worth celebrating. I stare at the readout for longer than I should. I could cry, yell, scream, or bang my hand against the hole, but there is no point. A deep sigh racks me instead as I download the audio samples and begin the trek back. My return is slower this time. The question I've been sitting on all this time keeps gnawing at me. Why? Why do I do this? Why do I subject myself to it? I crawl along the vast hunk of space, junk back towards the quarters. The sheer size of it, compared to where I live, go to the bathroom and sleep. I could fit an entire house inside this thing. Instead, I get a glorified outhouse. A garden shed with delusions of importance. As I slowly untangle my tether from the hooks, I crest the hole one last time and stare out into the void. Maybe someone is looking at me right now. Maybe there is an alien craft, speeding through the ink towards us, towards me, to pull me out of this nonsense and carry me somewhere else. I keep looking before a shadow blots out a few of the stars. It catches my eye, a shape casting a blackness. It's not debris. A silhouette cuts briefly across the field of distant lights. A wrong shape. I swear that it looks human, but wrong. A body without detail. No suit, no tether. It moves on naturally, as if it was a paper kite, caught in a impossible wind, moving with no rhythm or reason. Its long arms looked to have been dragged out of a depressurization event as it reaches out, splaying itself to me. The sight fills me with a horrible chill. I blink. Then it's gone. The stars are exactly where they were before. No distortion, no shape, nothing drifting. I blink hard, shake my head inside the helmet, and force my eyes to track known points, counting the stars, anchoring myself. Get a grip, I whisper. The void offers no argument. I turn back to regard the world below, hoping this time it will reveal something. Instead, I am disappointed, as usual. I cannot see a single strip of ocean or land. It's not clouds that cover it, but a single cloud, thick and unbroken, covering everything with small dashes of lighting breaking up the monotonous gray. A slight smile forms in my face. Maybe someone down there is looking up at me, cheering, or just glad that I keep this communications buoy alive and humming. Maybe. I slide back into the airlock and begin pressurizing. I keep the suit on longer than necessary, just in case. Just in case the O2 decides to fail. Maybe. Maybe that would be good. I shed my suit and drift in the compartment, breathing in the recycled air. I keep my eyes closed and bask in the metallic scent and old refuse. The urge to open a window is overwhelming. After a while, something brushes the bridge of my nose. Paper, rough, too close. I open my eyes and focus on the note, already sighing at its contents. That is the final resupply. I grab it and flip the paper, already knowing the message I have read 100 times. God help us, and God bless you for your sacrifice. Maybe it's all worth it. Maybe it's not. I let go and the paper joins the other messages I have scrolled. The doodles, the personal anecdotes, the words of encouragement. They all float with the photos of people I will never see again. I plug the PDA from my suit into the console and begin downloading the data, hoping to pass some time that does not involve sleeping. I wish they sent up more pencils. Opening the laptop, I try to clean up the data stream. It is definitely a communication, a message of some sort, but the storms have scrambled it badly. I am not an audio engineer, but with finite time and nothing else to do, I can manage trying to read some dead people's mail. I see my arms again as I go to type. If anyone saw me now, they'd mistake me for an alien. My skin is pale, my frame gaunt. I blink constantly from the strain of staring at screens, so I probably look bug-like. The smell I have likely grown used to, but I am unshaven. My hair months long, any attempt to comb or brush it long discarded along with most decent human necessities. I spend hours hunched over the screen, trying to unscramble the audio. There are gaps in my memory, moments where I must have lost consciousness, though I barely recall them. East, Tango Whiskey. There's... Are smart. If there is... Listening. The pact is secure. Prot. Self. The pact is secure. Hail. The voice has an accent I cannot quite place. It drawls its words, high and imprecise, slipping in and out of clarity. I cannot make sense of what it is saying. Pact. I am not a religious man, but that is the first time I have heard anything like that. I clean up more of the audio. Anyone hearing this? Keep heading east. More of them come. Keep to your people. The pact is secure. To you listening? Keep up. The static keeps breaking it apart. I keep trying to clear it. To you listening, open up. You must join the pact. I keep working the filters, stripping away noise, boosting what little remains. The words land cleanly this time. To you listening, open up. A sudden bang slams into the wall. I stiffen and slam my head into the roof, stars bursting across my vision. My body curls in on itself on instinct, spine flaring with pain. For a moment, I almost let myself drift away again. Then another bang hits the hole. I open my eyes and stare at the insulated wall. Breath loud. The station creaks, a deep metallic groan. Not like stress or thermal shift. It sounds burdened, as if weight has been added where there should be none. My thoughts race, grasping for explanations I don't believe. Thermal contraction, debris, pressure differential. Anything but intent. Is it what I saw? The thing out there? I stay still, I wait. The next impacts are smaller, measured, not collisions. Taps. My stomach turns, a slow, sickening drop, like missing a step in the dark. I glance towards the airlock and feel something cold settle behind my eyes. I don't have a viewport, no camera feed, just a sealed opening in the wall. The taps come again, closer, near the hatch. Knocking. The realization lands heavier than the sound itself. Someone, or something, is choosing where to probe. I think of how long it has been since anyone knew I was up here, since anyone spoke my name, since I was anything more than a cog in a machine. I want to shout, to announce myself, to demand answers. I don't. For the first time in what feels like a lifetime, I feel fear, so I wait. Nothing. My heart doesn't stop. I can't take a full breath. I float inside a 2-meter cube, attached like a tumor to a vast metal behemoth, and something is now probing, testing that small mass, testing if it can be opened up and squeezed empty into the void. But nothing happens. It could have been seconds or minutes. I fade in and out, despite the adrenaline. One final hit reverberates through my cell. This one sets the alarm off. The alarm screams, piercing through me as I scramble upright. I shove my arms into the suit, muscles tight, fumbling with clasps as red lights flash across the cabin. The helmet snaps into place, chest clip locked. I tug the tether from its hooks, coil it over my shoulder as I shove myself into the airlock chamber. The airlock spins up, hissing as it depressurizes, valves rattling under the strain. My heart hammers, lungs burning in the recycled air. I don't want whatever it is to catch me, so I kick off the hatch above, sliding out of the chamber just as the outer hatch opens up into the void. The tether catches, jerking me back from drifting too far. Stars stretch endlessly ahead, black and distant, as I fight to steady myself and get moving before whatever is out here decides I'm in reach. Once I turn, wrench in hand, I see nothing. Nothing but debris peppered across the hull. I take a strained breath. Sweat clings to my skin, pooling on my forehead. My eyes trace the damage from the impacts, and my fingers tighten around the wrench. A nightmare of work scattered in every direction. I yell, hurling the tool into the void. It spins once, twice, then drifts silently among the floating shards, a tiny protest against the emptiness. I let my gaze linger on the scattered debris a moment longer before I force myself to move. The tether is taut as I pull myself back towards the station. Each grip, each push reminds me how small I am against this cold, indifferent metal and the endless void beyond. I pause at the edge of my workstation, chest heaving, sweat stinging my eyes. The damage? It's worse than I first thought. Broken tiles, gouged panels, a mess that won't fix itself. Soon my hands and feet find purchase along the hull. I go to begin the routine again when a bright light catches my eye, a harsh yellow bloom, pushing up through the cloud cover below. It hurts to look at, even from here. just a single point of brightness forcing the clouds apart. My heart sinks at what it means. The explosion lingers in my vision longer after I look away. Again, I could cry, or laugh, or scream, or slam my fist into the hole, but what's the point? I float there and wait, blinking the after image from my eyes. Then I turn back to the void. I stare longer again, waiting for an answer. None comes. So I'll give it one. I return to the large satellite dish console beneath me. Fingers fly over the keys as I type in the override, shifting the satellite in tiny bursts, using what precious thrust it has for orbital corrections. I pointed at the brightest pinprick in the void, hoping, praying that it's correct. I connect the PDA again, opening the comms. I take a moment, letting my breath catch. Then I speak, voice trembling but steady, hoping it will carry. To anyone who can hear this, Mars has fallen. I repeat, Mars has fallen. My friends and I wanted to do something big together before we all went our separate ways at the end of the summer. We just recently graduated and decided we would take a trip to Mammoth Cave National Park for the weekend. It was 5:30 in the afternoon when River and Henry pulled up to the campsite in Henry's beat-up silver Pontiac. My other friends, Noah and James, greeted them excitedly. "You started a fire yet?" River asked, exiting the car, pistol on his hip. "No, James brought these crappy fire starters that don't work." Noah groaned. River was always the most outdoorsy person in the group. Though we were all raised in rural Kentucky, River spent more time in the wilderness, camping, hunting, fishing, hiking, etc. We had hoped to get the fire started before he got here, so he wouldn't give us crap. "The starters will work. Just give me one more try." James grabbed another starter. It was an empty toilet paper roll with dryer lint stuffed in the middle. He hunched over the crumbling pile of sticks and dried leaves we made and tried to light it with a lighter. No luck. "How did you get this idea again?" I asked James. "My mom thought this would be a good idea. I don't know why they won't start. I figured the dryer lint would light right up." He went back to trying to start the fire. When he once again failed, he grunted angrily and tossed the starter into the forest. It flew about 50 feet, hit a tree, and then thunked onto the forest floor. "Dude, the national park is gonna fine us for that," I said, hitting James on the shoulder. "They won't find it, and besides, it'll decompress." "Decompose?" "Whatever." I didn't know if the national park would fine us individually, or if it would all fall onto me since I made the reservation, but I knew I didn't want to find out. I made my way into the woods carefully watching for any signs of poison ivy. Luckily, it was close enough to the campsite that there was a small path that I assumed was made by people going out to pee. The path led me mostly to where the starter was, at least where I thought the starter was. When I got there, the spot was empty, all except a small tuft of lint stuck on a bush. Confused, I pulled the piece of lint from the bush and looked around, scanning the forest floor. There was nothing. I looked around one more time when my eyes locked onto something no more than 40 feet away. A yellow eye, like that of an eagle, peered just slightly from the side of the tree. Part of what I guessed was this animal's neck stuck out too. It was covered in white feathering, or maybe hair. It was hard to tell. Perhaps that was most concerning was the height of it. Nearly reaching the first branch of the large oak tree, the animal had to be at least 20 feet tall. I stood frozen. I felt ice shoot through my veins. My heart beat into overdrive. The creature just stared, unmoving. Did it know I saw it? Did it care? What was this thing? Questions shot through my mind one after another until my focus on the creature was broken. "Lucas! Lucas!" I turned my head at the sound of my name. It was Henry. He walked up, crunching leaves and twigs underfoot. I quickly turned back to look at the creature, but it was gone. "Did you find it?" Henry asked. "No, I'm not sure where it went." I kept my eyes on the tree, waiting for that thing to poke its head out again. "River got the fire started. Took him like 30 seconds. "Henry, I think there might be something out there. I just saw something peering from behind that tree." I pointed to where I saw it. Henry's gaze followed my finger, but he saw the same thing I did. Nothing. "Uh-huh," Henry said skeptically. "Well, if there is something out here, we'll be safer at camp." "Okay." I exhaled, trying to clear my head. My body was still tense, but I managed to walk it off by the time I got back to camp. Everyone had set up their chairs around the fire. I grabbed mine, unfolded it, and sat down next to Noah. I couldn't help but scan the trees around us for any sign that thing was there. "Are you good, bro?" Noah asked. "Yeah, I'm fine, sorry," I said hastily. "He's not fine. He said he saw something in the woods. I didn't know it freaked him out this much," Henry added. "What did you see? A bear?" James inquired. "Definitely not. I think it was some kind of bird," I said in a voice that held more fear than I wanted it to. "Well, we shouldn't let scary forest birds ruin our last summer trip before you all go to college and Noah and I go to the military," River said dismissively. "I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting hungry." "I could definitely eat," James chimed in. "Where do we want to go?" "I think there's a strip club nearby. We could get chicken strips and a lap dance." Henry laughed. "I'm down with that," River replied. "My girlfriend probably wouldn't like that, and I wouldn't want to keep it a secret from her. Besides, I don't really care for glitter in my food," Noah added firmly. "That's fair," James said. "What about this pizza place?" James held up a picture of the restaurant and we all nodded in agreement. Henry's Pontiac didn't have enough room for all of us, so instead we loaded into my red pickup truck. Our vehicles had to be parked end to end, so Henry moved his car so I could pull out. He pulled in again so his car would be in front when we got back. We overindulged at dinner that night. The place was nice. A small locally owned restaurant with a friendly staff. Under the excuse, "We're on vacation, let's splurge a little," we destroyed 2 large pizzas and 2 orders of breadsticks. It was good, but I felt like a disgusting greaseball afterwards. As we drove the winding path back into the campground, an overweight older woman waved at us and approached the vehicle. I stopped the car and rolled my window down. Her face was slightly red, and she wheezed a little bit as she approached. "Hello, ma'am. Can I help you?" I asked. She rested a fleshy arm on my car door, which put her closer to me than I would have liked. "I need to ask you boys a favor," she said in a voice that revealed she was a veteran smoker. "My sweet Mabel has run off from us. Could you keep an eye out for her? It's not like her to wander off." She held up her phone. There was a picture of a Shih Tzu with a bright pink collar around its neck. I moved my head so the others could see the picture. "We'll let you know if we see her. Hopefully she'll turn up soon," I told her. "Oh, thank you. My husband and I are staying in that camper there." She pointed to a noticeably large camper that barely fit in the parking space. "Please let us know if you find anything." I nodded and she turned and shuffled back towards her camper. Rolling the window up, I drove us back to our campsite. "That's too bad about the dog," James said solemnly. "Yeah, crappy place to lose a pet. She could be anywhere out there." River gestured to the forest around them. I pulled back into our parking spot and turned off the truck. The air conditioning left the vehicle quickly as the summer heat started to replace it. We looked at the campsite we left. "Crap," we said in unison. In front of us on the picnic table were 3 squirrels. They'd torn open the marshmallow bag we brought to make s'mores. The white puffs were strewn across the ground, each with little teeth marks in them. We got out, and the squirrels quickly scattered, though one decided to carry off one more marshmallow to go. Noah walked over and picked up the torn open bag. There was still about half a bag left. "Can we still eat these, or will we get rabies?" he asked. "I don't think that's how rabies works," River said, taking the bag from him. He picked out the ones with bite marks and tossed them on the ground. "There, now it should be fine." Noah looked at the bag as River held it out to him. "Yeah, I'm not going to take any chances." Noah held a hand up dismissively. "Baby," River taunted as he popped a marshmallow into his mouth. Noah frowned but said nothing. "Why don't we chill around the fire a little bit?" I said to change the subject. We all agreed and gathered around the campfire. I took a seat facing the woods. The sun was setting and the darkness was beginning to envelop the trees. The unsettling thought that anything could be out there looking back at me seeped into my mind. I shivered and shook it from my head. It wasn't productive to worry about what I can't see or control. "Focus on what you can control," my parents would tell me when I started to worry. I needed to remember that. We talked for a while around the fire, circling around topics of women, our futures, and past memories. It hit us that this would be one of the last times we would be together. We'd known each other since kindergarten and watched each other grow up. I felt a twist of cold sadness coil in my stomach. "I don't think I'm ready to leave you guys," I said in a squeakier voice than I wanted. "We can still stay in contact with each other. It won't be the same, but we can still talk," said Henry. James nodded. "You guys can reach out anytime. I'll try to check in weekly with you all." "Me too," Noah added. "I'm not sure how much I'll be able to talk after I get with the army, but I'll try to reach out when I can." River popped a zin as he said that. "I've been really fortunate to have you guys in my life." A tear fell from my eye, but I quickly wiped it away before anyone noticed. "I'm gonna miss you guys so much." "We had a really good run, though," James exclaimed, adopting a more positive tone. "Sure did," River smiled. "We get to make something of ourselves now. Be real men," Henry cheered. "That's right," Noah agreed. He stood up and grabbed 5 Mountain Dews from the cooler and passed one to each of us. "Cheers to our future," he yelled. "Cheers," we shouted in unison. My God, was it corny, but it lifted our spirits and the cold twist in my stomach lightened. It was now around 9:30 p.m. I excused myself from the restroom. I figured it was good to find the bathroom now so I wouldn't be searching for it in the middle of the night. In the distance, I heard the old woman who approached us earlier still shouting in the dark for Mabel to come back. Her voice was hoarse and weak even for a smoker. It was apparent that the poor woman hadn't stopped looking for the dog since the interaction they had with her. I walked the dirt trail to the restroom. It was a little off the path, but not by much. I could still see tents and campers through the trees. I walked into the men's room, and it was surprisingly clean. There were 2 urinals and 3 stalls. I found the stall furthest from the door and did my business. As I was about to open the stall door, I heard a bang on the door to the restroom entrance that made me pause for a moment. I listened. Silence. I finally exited the stall to see what made the noise. Approaching the entrance door, I put my hand on the handle when another hard bang rattled it. I felt the vibration of the strike travel from the door and up my arm. I let go of the handle and backed away. Whoever was on the other side was strong. Really strong. Another bang struck the door, and then another. How did they not know how to use a door? I thought. Were they drunk? The bangs only intensified. It was like a heavyweight boxer was trying to punch down the door. The noise fell into a rhythm. There was a clear and brief wind-up between each strike. "What do you want?" I finally gathered the courage to ask. Whoever was outside went crazy at that. The banging on the door became rapid, harsher and louder than ever. Then I watched the door handle jiggle. It turned down slightly and then straight up before being violently shaken. At that, I rushed back to the stall and locked myself in. For the first time, I thought it possible that the thing outside was not a who, but rather a what. The handle jostled a couple more times before I heard the door open slightly and then close again. Another bang struck the door before the handle jostled again. It wasn't long before I heard the door open again. This time it didn't close. I pulled my legs up off the floor and held my breath. I heard every beat of my heart in my ears. The door was pushed roughly against the wall with a loud clang. Instead of swinging back and latching, it thunked against something that prevented it from shutting. I heard dainty tapping footsteps on the concrete just outside the door. With a slow creak, the door was pushed open more. The creature I saw back in the woods came back to my mind. Whatever was entering the restroom at the moment did not seem remotely human, but also behaved like no animal I've ever heard of. I then thought about that missing dog and the possibility that she didn't run off. These thoughts swirled in my mind and caused my heart to pound harder against my rib cage. I heard a clacking sound like two pieces of wood being tapped lightly together. What was this thing? What was it doing? I didn't know, and I didn't care. I just didn't want it to find me. There was silence for about half a minute. Then the sound of something slowly sliding against the open door reached my ears. Then the door clicked shut again. It was maybe 15 minutes of silence before I gathered the courage to unlock the stall and walk out. It was another 5 minutes before I opened the door to the outside. I imagined some giant monster waiting outside to grab me the moment I walked out. But that's not what happened. I opened the door and immediately saw the peppering of dents covering it. It looked like someone had taken a hammer to it in a fit of rage. I looked over at the entrance to the women's restroom. It was entirely untouched. The possibility that that thing had stalked me on my walk and to the bathroom hit me. There was a reason why the girls' room was untouched. It had tried to follow me when I entered the bathroom. It was hunting. I wondered how close it got to me and I didn't even know. I looked around. There was no sign of whatever just attacked the door. I inhaled and then immediately bolted back toward our camp. My legs felt like rubber, and my pace felt like the slowest I've ever run. On my way back, I heard someone calling out the name Michael. Has another dog gone missing? I couldn't worry about it. I needed to get my friends and myself out of here as soon as possible. As I ran back to camp, I realized the silver Pontiac was gone. I'd left the keys in the truck, so they must have moved it out of the way so they could get out. I prayed that Henry and River decided to go home or were called back by their family. I ran up to the camp. James and Noah were sitting around the fire. "He's back," James said with a smirk. "We thought you'd fallen in." Noah laughed. I ignored what they were saying. "Guys, we have to leave right now," I said as I started grabbing stuff and putting them messily into a bag. Whoa, we have this place booked until Sunday morning. Why do you want to leave?" Noah protested. "You don't understand. There is something here hunting us. It tried to attack me in the bathroom and probably ate that lady's dog," I yelled in a panic. A worried look covered James' face. "Dude, you're scaring me. Are you okay?" "I saw it when I grabbed your stupid fire starter. I should have trusted myself and left then," I rambled. "We can't just leave. Henry and River are still here," Noah pointed out. I paused. "What?" "Yeah, they went to search the trail near the visitor center. There's some kid missing. I think his name is Miguel or something," James explained. "Michael," Noah corrected. Dread reached its claws into my stomach and twisted it into a knot. Call them right now. Get them out of there," I screamed. Okay, James said, pulling out his phone. He clicked Henry's contact and the phone rang, and rang, and rang. After each ring, I hoped to hear Henry's voice on the other end, but there was nothing. The call went to voicemail. He tried to call River. Same thing. "They must have no service," James declared. I paused and breathed, trying not to panic more than I already was. Every part of me wanted to pack up and leave. James and Noah could stay or go if they wanted, and I'd be back home in a couple of hours. But I couldn't leave them behind. What would I tell their parents if something happened? I sighed. We need to go get them, I said, trying to gain control of myself. James and Noah were hesitant to go and still looked worried about me. However, they still loaded into the truck and we drove the path to the visitors center. The parking lot was almost empty, all except an empty silver Pontiac parked near the trail entrance. We got out and faced the trail. It was so dark that the trail's entrance looked like some kind of abyssal void to hell. We turned on our flashlights and in a single file entered the trail. Noah went in first and I was in the back. Every corner of the woods seemed to move. Branches waved in the wind, bushes shook, twigs snapped. Every noise and movement put me further on edge. There were large, uneven stones that created a rough stairway down into a steep ravine. We traversed them carefully, trying not to twist an ankle. The trail widened at the bottom. We kept on walking until suddenly the temperature of the air dropped dramatically. It was cold and damp. "What is that?" James whispered. "Not sure," I whispered back. Noah took a few steps to the side and shone his flashlight around. "There." He flashed his light on a sign that read, "Cave Entrance," with an arrow pointing to a narrow trail that split off and descended further downward. The main trail continued and started to ascend back up the ravine. Just then, a voice came from the trail leading to the cave entrance. "Michael!" It was Henry. He was close. "Henry, River!" James shouted. "James?" River shouted back. "Yeah, get up here." A slight relief came over me with the fact that they were both alive. Through the trees, we saw their distant flashlights moving closer. The two of them jogged up the trail until they caught up with us. "Did you find the boy?" asked Noah. Henry shook his head. "No luck. We'll have to keep looking." "No," I yelled. River and Henry looked surprised. "There's some kind of monster here. It tried to attack me while I was in the restroom. I'm guessing it took that dog, and I wouldn't be surprised if the boy was gone too. We need to leave." "A monster like that thing you saw earlier today?" Henry asked. "Yes, and don't try to convince me I'm imagining things. I could never imagine this." "Okay, well, you've at least spooked me, and I'd like to get out of this forest now," Henry replied. "Let's go back that way then. We can get in our cars and go back to camp," River said, pointing in the direction we came. He led the way back through the path and we filed in behind him. We eventually came upon the same stone steps as before, when at the top, a putrid odor hit my nose. It smelled like crap. I wasn't going to ask anyone about it. I just wanted to get out. It could have been a number of animals that left it. Nobody else mentioned the smell either. We'd all been exposed to livestock before, so we were very accustomed to unpleasant smells, and they likely thought nothing of it. However, as I passed my flashlight over the trail, I found the source of the smell and I stopped as the rest of the group continued. It was a pile of dung, but it was larger than any dog could leave. Most unsettling of all was the frayed pink dog collar sticking out of its side. "Guys, I don't know if we should continue this way," I called out to them, but they were already stopped about 20 feet ahead of me. I jogged up to them to see what was going on. "Holy," I heard River mutter. I looked over them to see why they've stopped. The scene was brutal. Blood splattered the trail ahead of them, still shining crimson red. It was fresh. There were organs strewn around too. I saw a liver, stomach, pieces of intestines thrown about like silly string, and what I think was a kidney. The victim, a female deer, lay just a few feet in front of us. The front half of her body was concealed by the off-trail vegetation. Her abdomen was torn open and entirely hollowed out. "Did you see this on your way here?" Henry's voice quivered. "No," James whimpered. "It's here." "It's here, I know it is," I cried out. Panic had set in, and I didn't know if I should run or curl up in a ball and pray it doesn't find us. "Shut up," River hissed. "If there's something here, all that noise is going to get its attention." I moved my flashlight around frantically but saw nothing in the darkness and thick vegetation. I stopped to listen. There was no sound. No birds, no crickets chirping. Nothing. Then I saw it. Ahead of us, up a small hill about 50 feet off the trail, it showed its head, peeking its long neck around one side of a tree. Its eyes, shining white from the flashlight, were locked on them. It bobbed its head from one side of the tree to the other. A long pointed beak, about the size of a man, extended from its face. It had the same hair or stringy feathers I'd seen before. A blocky red crest sat above the eyes. Ice blasted through my veins. It was going to kill us. I knew it. The misfortune was almost laughable. We're out in the one place and one time that this awful unknown creature exists. I heard James yell as he noticed the creature too. Everyone pointed our flashlights at the thing. We held our breath and didn't dare to move. For a long time, we sat there watching this thing swing its head from one side of the tree to the other. Then it took its first step towards us. A long and lanky front leg moved forward slowly. It had a long finger that curled back and stuck straight up. It craned its neck down as it tediously moved like a cat stalking its prey. It eventually emerged from its concealments. The proportions of its body seemed entirely wrong. A giant head, long neck, spindly legs with the front being longer than the back. Its chest was shallow and frail looking. Whatever this was, it was not of this world, or had not been for a long time. It continued to creep forward until it was about 20 feet from us. To our horror, its cautious steps quickened into an unsightly gallop. It raced towards us. We scattered in two ways. Henry and I moved back a few feet into the trail, while the other three ran in the direction of the parking lot. I turned around and watched the creature catch James by the foot with its beak. He gasped and fell onto the trail. He tried to get up, but the monster smacked him with its beak, knocking him onto his back. Like a swing of a pickaxe, it brought its head up and plunged its pointed beak into his abdomen. With a swift motion, it pulled back and a string of James' intestines came with it. Surprisingly, James didn't scream. A look of panicked horror painted his face. He whimpered and tried to push himself away from the beast. It was horrible to watch. The tragedy of an animal trying to survive, even when there was no hope, unfolded before my eyes. I'm sad to say it, but at that moment, all I wanted was for James to die so he wouldn't suffer anymore. The monster tore off a piece of intestine and swallowed it whole. It noticed James' slow and desperate crawl away and craned its neck down towards him. It made 2 strikes in the blink of an eye. Both hit James in the throat just below the chin. His body fell, blood poured from his neck and out of his mouth. His eyes glossed over and I knew he was gone. The monster stood over my lifeless friend. Henry and I had stopped running long ago. How could we continue after what we just saw? The scene before us was entirely unreal. Suddenly a shot rang out, and that thing made the most terrible sound I've ever heard. It started low as a deep, throaty gurgle, but then crescended rapidly into a shrill, ear-piercing screech. Another shot rang out, and the creature screamed again. It turned and galloped toward the parking lot, limping painfully as it moved. I watched River and Noah jump to the side of the trail out of its way. It didn't even look at them. Instead, it kept running down the trail. Henry and I rushed over to them, running past James' deceased body. We hurriedly pulled Noah and River to their feet. "Get to the cars," River screamed, gun in hand. "Run." Racing down the trail, we prayed that the beast wouldn't jump out at us from the trees. It wasn't long before we got back to where we entered the trail. We stopped. That thing was in the parking lot, as if it couldn't get any more horrific. I watched as it took a running leap and threw itself into the air. Its forelegs opened into the largest pair of wings I've ever witnessed. From end to end, I guessed its wings were the width of a school bus. It took to the air but flew low. It tried to flap its wings, but its flaps were uneven, and the monster crashed to the ground near our cars with a pained wail. As it got up on its stick-like legs, I noticed a large bloodstain on its shoulder. It stood up, limping worse than before. It moved in anguish into the trees in front of our vehicles and disappeared. The four of us exchanged looks and bolted for our cars. I threw open the door to my truck and jumped in and slammed the door shut. Noah scrambled into the passenger seat. I watched River enter the passenger side of Henry's Pontiac. Henry threw open the door to the driver's seat but then stopped. The monster was back. Standing almost over him, it plunged its beak down. The glass of the driver's window shattered as the creature's head plowed through it. It recoiled and shook its head. Henry took off back towards the trail entrance. The beast gave chase, slower and with a pained limp. It was still fast enough to start closing in on Henry. I exhaled sharply. I wasn't going to let another person die tonight. I turned to Noah. "Get in Henry's car." "What? Are you crazy?" he yelled. "Now." Noah scrambled quickly into Henry's car while keeping an eye on the monster at all times. He got in and shut the door. I threw the truck in reverse and pointed the front end at the creature chasing Henry in front of the tree line. I slammed on the gas and the truck rocketed forward. I felt the front end slam down roughly as it left the pavement and fell onto the grass. The monster turned its head. Seeing the large vehicle barreling towards it, it left Henry and tried desperately to hobble away in the opposite direction. It wasn't fast enough. I turned the wheel sharply and caught the beast. It fell hard on the front end of the truck and fractured my front window. Then, with a loud bang, my truck collided with the solid trunk of a tree. My airbag deployed, which sent me roughly back into my seat. As it deflated, I exited the car. My chest was painfully bruised. My nose was bleeding and my head rang like a bell. I turned and looked at the damage. The front end of my vehicle was horribly damaged. It looked like it was trying to engulf the tree. Between the tree and the truck was the creature, horribly broken but still lashing what little parts it could move. One wing was crushed between it and the truck. The other stuck out at an odd angle and gave jerky movements. Its neck bent over loosely and its head hit the crumpled hood of the truck, blood pooling from its mouth. It opened and closed that terrible beak, but no sound came out. Its chest, lungs, and lower body were crumpled somewhere in the wreckage. As I watched its eyes blink and free wings flutter weakly, I was reminded of how James died. I found myself pitying the thing for a brief moment before I pushed the feeling away. It didn't feel right to give this thing the same emotion I'd given James. Henry, Noah, and River ran up to me shouting things I couldn't understand. My ears were ringing too loudly to hear anything. The last thing I saw was the red and blue lights of the emergency responders before I collapsed into darkness. I woke up in the hospital the next day. I had a concussion and had broken my nose and a few ribs. It hurt like hell for a while, but it wasn't anything too severe. Strangely enough, nobody ever questioned me or anyone about the events of that night. It wasn't until much later that I learned why. They already had their story. The news reported the events of that night as a wild black bear attack. For some reason, they covered it up. James' parents were told their son was mauled to death along with a Shih Tzu and a 12-year-old boy named Michael. For now, that's the story they will believe. Henry, River, Noah, and I didn't have it in us to tell them what happened. We'd sound crazy if we did. The cover-up did not go unscrutinized, however. For one, black bears were rare, if not unheard of, around Mammoth Cave. And two, fatal black bear attacks were almost just as unheard of. People wasted no time spinning theories about what happened that night. From Bigfoot, serial killers, and wild cave people. They landed on everything but the truth. I did some research of my own. After a Google search, I learned that the thing we encountered that night was called a Quetzalcoatlus. It's some flying reptile that went extinct with the dinosaurs about 66 million years ago. I guess that needs to be updated to June 16th, 2023. I find myself pitying the monster again from time to time. I guess I should stop calling it a monster. It was a predator, an animal. One is trying to find a place in a world that has long forgotten it. It died because it had to. The earth demanded it. The environment was not made for it anymore. If it wasn't the front end of my truck that got it, it would have been the bitter winter of the Midwest, disease or starvation. What still doesn't make sense is how it got there. I don't think some magic portal opened from the late Cretaceous and this thing slipped through. I think someone made it, and by some negligence, it got out. That explains the cover-up. Someone doesn't want people to know they made this thing, and I'm going to find out who. No matter how deep I have to dig. I've spent most of my adult life explaining complex things to people who don't want equations, which is to say I'm a scientist who learned very early how to make terrifying ideas sound harmless. When people ask me about quantum entanglement, I don't talk about mathematics or probability amplitudes. I talk about pairs. I say imagine two things that touch once, just once, and from that moment on, no matter how far apart they are pulled, they remain linked. Change the state of one, and the other responds instantly, not because anything traveled between them, but because separation was never fully achieved. The universe remembers the interaction. It does not forget. There is an older story that says the same thing in less forgiving language. Aristophanes wrote about it in Plato's Symposium, how humans were once whole beings, round and complete, powerful enough that the gods feared us. Zeus split us in half not to teach us love, but to weaken us, to make us manageable, condemning us to wander the earth longing for reunion, mistaking the pain of incompleteness for romance. People like to tell that story at weddings. They never linger on the punishment part. I didn't think either story applied to people in any literal sense until I met him. It happened once. Only once. In a church I didn't belong to, on a day heavy with license and obligation. He was older than me by decades, old enough that the attraction should have been theoretical, harmless, easily dismissed. He had a wedding ring, a family, a life already spoken for. When our eyes met, something in my body recalibrated without my consent, like a system suddenly forced into alignment, and I remember having to sit down because the floor felt unreliable beneath my feet. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. From that moment on, my life developed a background hum, a low, constant tension I couldn't trace to any immediate cause. I lived responsibly. I kept my distance. I did not pursue him. We crossed paths rarely, always accidentally, always briefly, in places that belonged to neither of us. Funerals, hospital corridors, once, years later, a sidewalk on Valentine's Day, couples flowing past us carrying flowers and balloons while we talked about the weather because it was the only safe thing left to say. He was careful in the way people are careful when they know exactly what they're avoiding. I was careful too, because knowledge doesn't grant permission. Entanglement doesn't require proximity. That's the part people misunderstood. Once a system has interacted, once its states have been linked, distance becomes irrelevant. You can isolate the particles, shield them, place them light years apart, and still, a change in one is reflected in the other. No signal, no delay, just correlation, persistent and absolute. The system behaves as if it resents being forced apart. I felt him in the quiet ways that don't leave evidence. Sudden calm with no explanation. Sudden grief that arrived ahead of news. Nights where my body refused sleep, restless and alert, like it was waiting for something it couldn't see. Later, I would learn he'd been ill during one of those stretches, anxious during another. I stopped calling it coincidence after the pattern stabilized. This is where the horror actually begins. Though from the outside it looked like discipline, like restraint, like maturity, I maintained distance. I didn't insert myself into his life. I didn't confess anything. I didn't fracture anything fragile. But the energy had nowhere to go, so it turned inward. I became erratic in small, socially acceptable ways, obsessive about my work, detached from relationships that didn't resonate, unwilling to plan futures that extended very far. I lived as if part of me was already elsewhere, already occupied. Love that endures does not soften, it pressurizes. When he died, it was not sudden or dramatic. It was medical, expected, surrounded by people who loved him in all the ways that mattered legally and morally and publicly. I found out afterward, through careful messages and softened language, and I remember sitting very still, waiting for the pain to arrive. It didn't. What arrived instead was collapse, not grief as people understand it, not tears or anguish, but something structural giving way. The background tension vanished all at once, and with it went my orientation. It felt like losing gravity, like a constant force had been removed and nothing rushed in to replace it. For the first time since meeting him, my chest was quiet, and the quiet was unbearable. That's when I stopped living in any meaningful sense. I continued existing. I ate, I slept, I went to work. Habits are stubborn things, but I stopped investing in time. Days flattened. The future became abstract. Everything felt like an after-image, like I was moving through a world that had already finished happening. I understood, with a clarity that frightened me, why some people die shortly after their spouses do, why grandmothers fade within months of grandfathers being buried, why we frame it as romance instead of what it really is. A system, returning to equilibrium. Entangled particles tend toward the same state. When one collapses, the other follows. Not because it wants to, not because it chooses to, but because it was never designed to remain independent indefinitely. Separation holds only as long as both states are sustained. I don't miss him the way people expect. There is no sharp pain, no dramatic longing. What I miss is the tension, the pull, the proof that something in the universe was still responding to me. Without it, everything feels inert. I move, but nothing reacts. I speak, but nothing answers. The ancient Greeks weren't romantic. They were warning us. The gods didn't separate us to make love meaningful. They separated us because love that endures destabilizes systems, fractures order, makes people unreliable. Love that doesn't fade doesn't ennoble you. It erodes you quietly until you are no longer fit for the life you are expected to lead. It's Valentine's Day as I write this, and people are celebrating love like it's something that sustains you, something that keeps you alive. I know better now. Love that lasts does not sustain. It dismantles. It leaves you partially collapsed, still technically functioning, but no longer whole. I didn't start out believing I was in danger. That would have been easier. Something sharp and actionable. Something I could fight or flee from. What I felt instead was adjustment. The way systems recalibrate quietly before anyone notices anything has gone wrong. My heart rate began dropping at the same hour every night, slow and deliberate, as if it was practicing. My left hand went numb for minutes at a time, then returned to normal without explanation. I woke with bruises that didn't hurt, small and round, exactly where IV lines had once been threaded into his skin. I told myself it was stress, grief, neurology misfiring under prolonged strain. So I did what I have always done when something refuses to stay in the realm of metaphor. I measured it. I pulled his medical records. I overlaid timelines. I compared decay curves and physiological markers and found correlations that were not poetic or interpretive but statistical, repeatable, indifferent to my feelings. The closer he had come to death, the more unstable my own system became, like a coupled oscillator losing amplitude. Entangled systems resist asymmetry. They seek equilibrium, not emotionally, mechanically. That's when I stopped telling people I was grieving. I wasn't. I was drifting. The silence I felt after he died wasn't peaceful. It was alignment beginning to assert itself. Without the counterforce of his presence, my state began narrowing, my range collapsing, like a waveform being observed too closely for too long. Days feel thinner now. Time compresses around certain hours, especially the hour he died. Sometimes clocks stall. Sometimes I lose minutes standing in rooms I don't remember entering. The world hasn't become hostile. It has become precise. The calling doesn't sound like his voice. That would be kinder. It feels like pressure, like a gentle but persistent hand at my back, correcting my posture towards something inevitable. It's strongest when I'm still, when I'm not distracted by work or movement or noise. It's strongest near places where boundaries are thin, hospitals, churches, mirrors. I don't think it's asking me to die. I think it's reminding me I'm unfinished. People talk about grandmothers who die shortly after their husbands as if it's devotion, as if love carries them gently into death. They don't talk about the weeks beforehand, the confusion, the withdrawal, the way life seems to lose friction. They don't talk about the possibility that a system simply cannot sustain imbalance forever, that something ancient and impersonal begins closing the distance. I am still alive. I am still capable of writing this, but I can feel my margins shrinking, my reactions slowing, my sense of self thinning, like something is being conserved elsewhere. I don't know when the correlation will complete. I only know it will not announce itself. Systems like this never do. That's why I'm writing now. Not because I want help in the way people usually mean it, but because I need someone to know that love that endures is not benign. It is not romantic. It is not safe. It binds states together long after morality and circumstance say they should remain separate. If you feel it too, that quiet pull, that sense of responding to something you can't see, pay attention. Not everything that feels like love is meant to be survived. I don't know what the universe will ask of me next. I only know it's already started asking. Shady Palms was its name, a family-owned retirement home that had been up and running since the late 70s. It's trademarked by its vibrant colors, lush gardens, decadent food, and the pool. The old folks really liked the pool. They were also one of the few retirement homes that could boast that they own beachfront property, which plenty of residents enjoyed. Most days, you'd find folks by the sea reading a book, jogging on the shore, or falling asleep in a fold-out chair, only to be scorched by the sweltering Floridian sun. The simple pleasures of the beach aren't the only thing they offer. There's also a small recreational area where folks can read, hold clubs, play bingo, all that stuff. I'm in my early 20s and desperate for money. I figured that a place like this for a fresh medical student would be an easy way to make money. Besides, working at an assisted living place would be great on a resume. As it turns out, Things got way more complicated than I expected. Not in a I saw people I liked pass away sort of thing. When you're going into senior care, you've got to prepare to say goodbye. It's a harsh reality, but it's true. What complicated things was what came out while I worked the night shift. Something I'm still not sure what to make of. My job was the same as everyone else's when it came to senior aid. Prep the beds, clean the rooms, make sure everyone is comfortable, and so forth. The late shift is a position that everyone was expected to do at least once every few weeks. It was just a daily rotation of who was unlucky enough to stay up and deal with some of the old folks. It'd be 2 people in the reception area awaiting any late night calls or, God forbidden, emergencies. Most of the time, it was just staying up late until the morning staff dismissed you. Since we've got a pretty big staff, I can say that I've only ever been on late shift twice during my time there. I never minded it, and from how people grumbled about it, you'd think they'd been in a war. Waste of time, a guy named Will told me. All they do is sleep, so let's let them sleep. Then, when our boss, an authoritative figure by the name of Beulah, heard his little spat, she promptly fired him. She had zero tolerance for staff who had disdain for their job. Beulah was a sweetheart when I worked under her, but she ran a very tight ship. Her reasoning is understandable. Her grandfather was in a senior home before he passed, and it wasn't until they examined the body that they found the bruises all over his legs and back. Evidently, one of the orderlies had a disdain for him due to his wetting the bed, and promptly beat him with his own cane. If there's even the tiniest bit of resentment from one of the orderlies, she nips it in the bud, and I honestly don't blame her. It was Sunday when I got the call that I'd be covering the late shift for this week, but this time around, I'd be doing it alone. Evidently, Greg, whose name was drawn for tonight, was down with the flu. Nobody else could fill in due to other obligations, which was just a vague excuse not to work the late shift. I didn't mind, though. I just got a small stack of books for the coming week to keep myself entertained. I'd watch stuff on my phone, but I don't want to wake anyone up, and I don't want to put in headphones either, because what if someone calls the desk in the middle of the night? I wasn't taking any chances. I had taken with me Demeter by Blatty, Weaver World by Barker, The Orchard Keeper by McCarthy, and, most ironically, Night Shift by King. As for drinks, I got a pack of cold brew iced coffees, the tall ones in cans. Night 1 wasn't anything special. Got 2 calls, one from Herschel McCoy complaining about Thomas Hatfield's TV being too loud. So I played mediator and tried to get them both to come to an agreement. After that petty squabble, they were silent for the rest of the night. Thankfully. Night 2 was when it started. I was halfway through Demeter when I got sleepy. I rubbed my eyes and lay my head down over the desk. I heard waves lapping outside, rising and crashing. I don't know how long I was out, but I was suddenly jolted awake by a phone call coming from Maud Wells. I know we're meant to be fair and kind to the folks who stay here, but Maud was such a gigantic B-word. She wouldn't admit it, but I think that even Beulah hated her. I creased the page and laid the book down. I braced my ears for shouting, and I picked up the phone. "Hello, Mrs. Wells? Is everything all right?" There was nothing at first. I waited for a response, and I thought that maybe she had just accidentally called me. I was about to hang up when her shrill voice spoke up in a whisper. "Claire." "Yes?" "There's someone in my room." Now, mind you, I've been at the front desk this whole time and saw no one enter or leave. Also, I didn't think I was asleep so long that someone could have just snuck in. Yet, I'd never heard her sound this nervous. When she spoke, and she spoke often, she would talk loud and slow, as if accosting a rude child. This time, she was timid and somewhat frightened. Before I could say anything, she said with a quivering voice, "It looks like you." I'm sorry? This person looks... Oh my god. Mrs. Wells, are you feeling nauseous or having any headaches? Claire, she said in a hoarse whisper, just come in here, please. I hung up the phone and ran to her room. Her room is on the far side of the building, so I was sprinting towards her. As I stomped down the halls, I heard a brief scream followed by a sickening noise, like a pound of flesh getting tenderized by a hammer. Thump. I pushed on until I reached the room, and that's when I saw something run out into the hall. It looked like a person was sprinting out of there. They slid on the floor before they quickly got back to their feet. They were wearing nothing but black clothes from head to toe. Hey, I shouted, but they were already gone by the time I reached the corner of the hall. It's like when they turned right, they just vanished. I ran back to her room and flicked on the lights. To say I was shocked was an understatement. Her eyes were swollen shut, like there were 2 oversized grapes over her eyes. Fresh blood splattered her pillow, and her nose was bent in a position that didn't seem possible. She was gargling blood while she was gasping for air. Can't see. Claire? I can't see. I called 911 immediately and alerted the other staff about what happened. I, as well as the other staff, was pretty shaken up after the whole thing. The police took notes, got interviews, and even reviewed security footage. They saw the same person dashing from Mrs. Wells' room, but it was all blurry. Shady Palms may be up to date with most of our equipment and technology, but unfortunately the one thing we needed to update was our cameras. We had only a handful, and they hadn't been changed out since the mid-2000s. Say what you will about VHS, but they were at least clear, as fuzzy as it might be. The early digital cameras that we had were absolutely abysmal in terms of quality. There was just a black blurb moving from hallway to hallway. They never got footage of where it went. The police stayed for the rest of the day to investigate the area, looking for any and all pieces of evidence they could gather. Sadly, the only piece of DNA they could find was Mrs. Wells' own blood. I was called in for questioning that morning, and they assured me it was just a formality. I had a rock-solid alibi, and the cameras backed it up. When I returned home, I blacked out and didn't dream. I was awoken by an alarm that read, "Night shift." I groaned and called Beulah, and despite understanding why I might be hesitant to return to Shady Palms, but told me. Imagine what it must be like for them. Someone attacked Maud in the middle of the night, and you expect them to get a good night's rest? I know you're just one person, but sometimes one person can make all the difference. I hated the idea of going in, but she had a point. Night 3 was thankfully a night of peace. No calls, no disturbances, and no random attackers prowling in the rooms at night. I was too scared to pick up a book, and I just downed 3 cans of the iced coffee to make it through the night. I kept snapping my gaze back and forth around me, trying to spot something, anything out of the ordinary. I fell asleep in the last hour, and I know that we were indoors, but I could still hear the sound of the waves rising and crashing. It was a soothing noise to fall asleep to. They found me slumped over the desk, my hair clinging to a pool of spit. It wasn't the best look. "Morning, Claire," Vic told me. He was someone my age, a very mellow guy by all means. "Hey," I said in my slurred, drowsy sleep. "Anything happen?" "No, thank Christ above, no." Vic took in a deep breath, and I looked up to see that he had a very troubled expression. "Good. Beulah got a call last night from the hospital. Maud died." I had grievances against Maud, sure, but she didn't deserve that. In that moment, I had a whirlwind of emotions that I couldn't process properly. I just nodded and grabbed my things. Vic tried to comfort me, but I waved him off. "I'm fine. I just need a good sleep before my next shift, okay?" "I'll see you next time, Claire." I drove home, and when I showered, All of the emotions I'd bottled up just exploded. I just started crying, and I couldn't stop. I felt a tremendous black pit in my stomach, and guilt was eating away at me like cancer. I dried myself off and took 2 anxiety tablets before bed. Like the previous day's sleep, there were no dreams. Night 4 was busy, but thankfully not in a dangerous way. I went door to door checking on everyone, and they all thanked me. After what happened to Maud, I thought they'd surely turn against me. Herschel McCoy even pulled me aside and reassured me. "It's okay, honey. That wasn't your fault. I'm sure the police will get that guy. You're doing your best." I thought I could make it to the end, but the drowsiness of the night shift got to me again, and I ended up falling asleep. I heard the same sound of the waves rising and falling on the shore. I was starting to enjoy the night shift again despite it all. I'm woken up by Wanda, one of the more reserved members of Shady Palms. She usually sticks to cleaning and leading the yoga sessions on weekends. She touched my shoulder, and I stirred awake. "Wakey, wakey," she said. I looked around, seeing the early morning sunrise flood the hallways with brilliant oranges and yellows. Eventful shift? I chuckled at that. I got up to stretch and felt my bones pop in my back. Ugh, I need my bed. I bet. Say, you should have wiped off your boots before doing your walkabouts. You track sand and mud all over the place. I rubbed the crust out of my eyes and said, "I ain't wearing boots." "Oh yeah? Well, the tracks lead all the way back too." She stopped talking. I looked back at her to see that her skin was turning pale. "What?" I asked. But she just backed away from me and looked at the marble flooring. The oversized, muddy boot prints were right behind where I was sleeping. I shot up in terror, feeling ice coursing through my veins. I stared at the dried boot prints that caked the floor. Our eyes trailed the tracks all the way back to Herschel's room. "Oh God," I whimpered. We both ran to the room, and when we flung open the door, I was hopeful in the first few seconds of entering the room, because it looked like Herschel simply fell over onto the floor and spilled something dark next to him. I didn't even notice how ghostly white he was. When blood is undisturbed and still, it looks almost black. When Wanda tried to pull him up to his feet, that's when it all hit me at once. The blood finally smeared, displaying a rich red color beneath the puddle of darkness. And then the air suddenly smelled of pennies. Then there was, of course, Herschel himself. He had a concave hole where his face should be. The only thing protruding out was his lower jaw. Everything was sunken in and twisted. It was like a fleshy chalice that held blood. The police were called in again, and it was the same story as last time. The only difference this time is the boot prints. And when they went to check the cameras this time, they only found that one was working. The one overlooking the front desk. One of the officers pulled me aside and told me what I had heard before I fell asleep. I said I only heard the ocean waves crashing against the shore, rising and falling, nothing else. He looked at me quizzically and pinched his brow. "Makes no sense," he said. He cleared his throat and sat down next to me while he pulled up his laptop. He wrapped his arms around me, and for a second, I thought this might have been some sort of attempt at flirting, but I soon realized that he was bracing me for what I was about to see. "This is the security camera overlooking you most of the night," he said. He fast-forwards through the night, seeing me wiggle around, read, and walk about during the camera's feed. But he then stops when I start to fall asleep. Something walks into frame, a figure wearing all black, including a pair of boots. It walked behind me, tracking mud and sand behind it. Then it stopped, looming over me, like it was observing me. Then it turned to the camera. I know that our security camera's quality isn't the best, but I know what I was looking at. I saw my own face staring back at me. A warped version of it with a garish grin that exposed all of her teeth. like a toddler learning to smile for the first time for a picture at school. Its arms were dangling beside it like pendulums, and at the end of each one were two meaty, man-like hands. When it turned away from the camera, it ran towards what I'm assuming is Herschel's room, and was gone for only a few minutes. This thing did all of this horrible stuff in just a few minutes. It returned to the camera, holding its hands up like a surgeon who just sterilized himself. Shiny blood coated the massive hands, and with a silent glance to the camera, it walked out of the building. Police said they'd look into the killer, put up signs online using the footage they gathered, and tried to enhance it as best as they could. Beulah ran to me after the police left to check if I was okay. I was not, but I was handling it. She gave me a big hug and told me that I wouldn't be alone tonight, because she was staying with me. She looked around the room at the staff and cops going about their business, and she pulled me in close, telling me, "I'll bring a gun tonight. If this thing comes back, I'll blow its brains out. No one messes with us." I went home and slept. This time around, I did have dreams. I was walking the halls, and then I was watching myself sleep. I started to feel a tinge of panic, and when I tried to breathe through my mouth, it was hard. It felt strange. All I could do was breathe through my nose, inhaling and exhaling. I thought it sounded familiar, almost like waves crashing, rising and falling, inhaling and exhaling. I walked to Maud's room and saw her lying asleep. I looked in the mirror and saw my face, but not the one that I'm used to. This was something different. This was the version of my face I saw in the camera. My teeth were stuck in a perpetual grin, and all I could do was weep. I heard a voice from behind me say, "Who's there?" I turned around to see Maud looking at me with confusion, and as she put on her glasses, her expression changed into fear. She grabbed the phone and began to dial. I shook my head and tried to tell her not to call anyone, but I couldn't speak. "Claire, there's someone in my room. It looks like you." I ran to her, pleading with her to hang up, waving my hands to her, but she was about to scream, so I tried to cup my hand over her mouth. But with these monstrous hands, I ended up maiming her. I slapped my palm over her face to quiet her, but I ended up breaking her nose. She shrieked and I panicked. I just wanted to knock her out, but it only made things so much worse. So I decided that maybe I should stop her suffering. But before I could do anything, I heard footsteps reaching me, and I ran out to the hall. When I turned the corner, I was back in the lobby, looking at myself sleeping. This time, I looked at myself for only a second, and I ran out of the building and trudged through the sand and mud to get to my car. But as soon as I touched the handle, I found myself back in the lobby once more. It was some sort of freakish loop. I saw myself sleeping peacefully, and looked down at my boots to see the mud clinging to them, and when I looked at the camera watching me, an intense disgust washed over me, like a putrid form of déjà vu. Before I could gather myself, I heard a voice cry out from behind me. "Claire? Hello?" said Herschel. He got up from his bed and peered out into the halls, and my gaze met his. "Jesus Christ, it's back," he said. He dashed back into his room and I chased after him. I wasn't the killer. It was a misunderstanding. I entered his room and saw that he was pressing the 9 for 911 and I panicked. I seized him and threw him to the ground with a greater force than I imagined. He went face first into the tiled floor, and I heard the muffled crunch of his face. I grabbed him and tried to see if he was all right, but the damage was done. Warm blood flowed down my hands. I walked out of the room, holding my hands up, feeling the blood flow onto my clothes, but none of it dripped onto the floor. I glanced at the camera for only a moment, and then I fled outside. This, of course, was in vain. I returned to the lobby. This time was different. I saw myself sleeping, but Beulah was there next to me. She was awake and reading a magazine. I took shallow, panicked breaths as I backed away in silence. but Beulah turned around and looked at me with utter horror. I held my hands up, still slicked with fresh blood, and tried to calm her. "What are you?" she screamed. "Claire, wake up." I did not move from the desk, and in her desperation, Beulah pulled out her pistol that she kept in her purse. She pointed it, and I lunged at her to take the gun away. As soon as the gun went off, I got a phone call that brought me out of slumber. I awoke soaked in sweat. My room was freezing. My clothes clung to me, and I heard the thundering sound of my phone vibrating on my bedside table. I saw that my room was illuminated by the dark reds of the setting sun. I looked at the rumbling phone and saw it was Beulah's caller ID. I picked it up with a trembling hand and answered, "Yes?" "You ready for the night shift, Claire?"